Every single manipulator is entirely unaware of the silent horror waiting at the very end of their life, a creeping dread that no amount of charm or stolen energy can ever hold back. You are about to discover the hidden agony of a narcissist in their twilight years, a time when their endless supply of victims finally dries up completely. This is the ultimate reckoning they desperately try to hide from you. Imagine building a grand castle out of stolen energy, emotional manipulation, and fabricated realities. For decades, the narcissist sits on this throne, convinced of their own absolute superiority. But what happens when the foundation begins to crumble under the heavy weight of time and aging? The physical beauty fades, the sharp wit dulls, and the people who once fed their ego quietly slip away. We rarely speak about the aging narcissist because society tends to focus on the immediate damage they cause in their prime. But the true psychological horror story unfolds behind closed doors during their final decades on this earth. The very traits that once brought them absolute power and control over others now become the exact weapons of their own relentless, agonizing psychological torture. This is the era of the deadly years, a phase where the grand illusion they spent a lifetime projecting finally fails to reflect in the mirror. The enablers are gone, exhausted or discarded over the years, leaving the narcissist stranded in a profound and echoing isolation. They reach out to pull their strings, only to find that there are no puppets left attached to the other end of their web. Without fresh supply to feed their fragile, insatiable ego, they are forced to confront the one thing they have run from their entire existence. They must finally face the hollow, desperate emptiness that lives right at the core of their soul. It is a slow, suffocating realization that all their supposed greatness was nothing more than a cheap parlor trick played on a captive, unsuspecting audience. You might wonder if they ever feel regret when they find themselves totally alone in these twilight years. Do they look back at the trail of broken hearts and shattered minds and finally feel genuine remorse for their actions? The chilling truth is that they do not mourn the pain they caused you or anyone else. They only mourn the tragic loss of their own supreme power and unchallenged authority. This hidden reality is what makes the end of a manipulator's life so profoundly agonizing and inescapable. They are trapped inside a decaying physical vessel, armed with a mind that still demands absolute worship from a world that has completely moved on. The audience has left the theater, the lights have been turned off, and the aging narcissist is left screaming their lines into the total dark. To understand this final collapse, we must first dissect the fundamental mechanisms they used to survive for so long. Their entire personality was constructed as a defense mechanism to avoid looking at their own profound shame and utter worthlessness. By extracting validation and emotional reactions from you, they were able to prop up a fictional character that shielded them from their own reality. But old age does not respect false narratives or carefully constructed delusions of absolute grandeur. Time strips away the physical attractiveness, the professional status, and the sheer energy required to run complex manipulation campaigns. As these external pillars of identity inevitably collapse, the narcissist is left defenseless against the crushing weight of their own overwhelming inadequacy. This is where the true nightmare begins for them, a slow-burn descent into a personal hell of their own making. You will see exactly how the very behaviors that once made them seem so invincible eventually become the chains that bind them in their final years. We are about to pull back the curtain on this deeply hidden truth and expose the painful reality of what happens when the supply stops. The foundation of narcissistic supply is built on constant, unyielding external validation from every person they encounter. During their younger years, they could easily charm new acquaintances, secure devoted partners, and demand respect in the workplace. They moved quickly from one source to the next, leaving a chaotic trail of emotional destruction while easily finding fresh targets to exploit. As they enter their advanced years, this relentless predatory cycle hits an absolute, impenetrable brick wall. The charming facade that once worked flawlessly to draw people in becomes rigid, transparent, and bitterly unappealing to newcomers. Younger generations see right through the outdated manipulation tactics, and their remaining peers are entirely too tired to play these exhausting mind games. Notice how an aging narcissist becomes increasingly rigid, demanding, and easily enraged by the smallest of perceived slights. They are desperately trying to force the world to treat them with the same unearned reverence they enjoyed in their prime. When people refuse to comply with these ridiculous demands, the narcissist experiences this as a severe, life-threatening injury to their fragile ego. This behavioral shift often manifests as extreme hypochondria or constant, dramatic complaining about their physical ailments. Since they can no longer secure attention through their charm, accomplishments, or beauty, they resort to weaponizing their own decline. They will use sickness, whether real or completely fabricated, to guilt-trip family members and force them into a subservient, caring role. Yet, even when people do step up to care for them, the aging narcissist is completely incapable of feeling genuine gratitude. The caregivers are treated with profound contempt, constantly criticized, and reminded that nothing they do will ever be good enough. This relentless abuse eventually drives away even the most loyal family members, ensuring the narcissist's ultimate and complete isolation. Another fascinating behavioral adaptation in the deadly years is their desperate attempt to rewrite family history entirely. They will endlessly recount stories where they are either the flawless, unappreciated hero or the innocent, tragic victim of circumstance. They require you to validate these delusional memories because accepting the truth of their past cruelty would completely destroy their ego. You can observe their terror in the way they react to any conversation about their past mistakes or undeniable failures. A normal person can reflect on their life with a healthy mix of pride, gentle regret, and peaceful acceptance of their human flaws. The aging narcissist, however, will fly into a terrifying rage if you dare to suggest they were anything less than perfectly divine their whole life. This intense paranoia stems from their realization that they are rapidly losing control over the narrative they built. When they were younger, they could simply discard anyone who figured them out and start fresh with an entirely new social circle. Now, lacking the energy to build new connections, they are trapped with the very people who remember exactly who they are and what they have truly done. They begin to hoard resources, money, or property as a final, desperate method of maintaining control over their adult children. If they cannot keep you around through emotional connection, they will absolutely try to keep you trapped through financial blackmail. They dangle inheritances and assets like carrots on a stick, relishing the last tiny scraps of power they can squeeze from their fading life. But even these final manipulation tactics eventually lose their power as the reality of their mortality becomes impossible to ignore. The money and the guilt trips cannot stop the relentless ticking of the clock or fill the crushing silence of their empty home. They are left alone with the terrifying mechanics of their own mind, completely exposed to the harsh consequences of a life lived without love. There is a profound sense of cosmic justice in observing the twilight years of someone who spent their life destroying others. For decades, it seemed like they were getting away with everything, effortlessly dodging accountability while their victims deeply suffered. But the universe has a patient, unyielding way of balancing the scales, and the aging narcissist is entirely unable to escape the final toll. The retribution they face is not a fiery punishment from above, but rather the unbearable weight of their own profound emptiness. They spent their entire existence ensuring that no one could ever truly know them, building walls of deception to hide their true self. Now, in their final years, their deepest fear has materialized in full force. They are completely unknown, unloved, and entirely alone. Think about the pure irony of a person who demanded to be the center of the universe finally becoming totally invisible to everyone. The very society they once manipulated so masterfully now completely ignores them, seeing only a bitter, complaining elderly person. Their grand delusions of superiority are met with absolute, soul-crushing indifference from a world that never actually needed them at all. This is the ultimate spiritual payback for a lifetime of treating human beings as disposable objects and convenient appliances. When you treat people like objects to be used and discarded, you eventually run out of people who are willing to be used. The narcissist suddenly finds themselves living in a barren wasteland of their own creation, surrounded only by the ghosts of relationships they ruined. Every single act of betrayal, every lie they told, and every tear they caused has slowly built the walls of their final prison. They cannot look back on their life and find comfort in warm memories of genuine connection, deep intimacy, or unconditional love. They can only review a cold, calculated ledger of wins and losses, a meaningless scorecard that holds absolutely no value at the end of the game. The tragic beauty of this retribution is that it is entirely self-inflicted and completely unavoidable by any mortal means. No one had to scheme against them, plot their downfall, or seek active revenge to make this miserable reality come into existence. The natural consequences of their own pathological selfishness have simply caught up to them, delivering a flawless and poetic form of quiet justice. While their victims have spent years healing, growing, and learning how to build authentic connections with decent human beings, they stagnated. The narcissist never grew beyond the emotional age of a terrified toddler, constantly throwing tantrums to get their basic needs met. Now, trapped in an aging body, that stunted emotional development is glaringly obvious and profoundly pathetic to witness. They are forced to watch from the sidelines as the people they once abused move on to live happy, thriving, and deeply fulfilling lives. This is a special kind of agony for them, knowing that their victims survived the abuse and ultimately flourished without them. It shatters their core delusion that they were an omnipotent God in your life, proving once and for all that they were entirely unnecessary. This cosmic shift is silent, heavy, and absolutely merciless in its execution upon the fragile psyche of the aging manipulator. They cannot charm their way out of physical decline, and they cannot gaslight the Grim Reaper into giving them more time on Earth. They are entirely stripped of their primary weapons, left to face the terrifying void of mortality completely disarmed and painfully vulnerable. In these moments of quiet desperation, the scales of justice are finally balanced, bringing peace to those who suffered under them. The universe ensures that the energy they put out into the world returns to them, amplified by the isolating reality of old age. This divine retribution forces them into a terrifying, psychological collapse that they can never escape, no matter how hard they try to run. The psychological destruction of an aging narcissist is not a sudden, dramatic explosion, but a long, excruciatingly slow collapse. It is the quiet implosion of a false self that no longer has the external support necessary to keep its flimsy structure standing. Without the constant flow of narcissistic supply, their deeply buried feelings of worthlessness begin to seep into their conscious mind. Imagine the absolute terror of realizing that your entire personality is a complete fiction, a mask worn for so long it bonded to bone. As the mask finally cracks, the underlying void threatens to swallow them completely in a tidal wave of unacknowledged shame. They experience a profound psychological disintegration, a total loss of identity that leaves them feeling deeply unanchored and truly terrified. To combat this internal collapse, they may become incredibly bitter, lashing out at everything and everyone still in their vicinity. They watch the news with intense hatred, complain endlessly about how society has deteriorated, and curse the changing modern world. This persistent, simmering rage is just a desperate distraction, a final attempt to project their own internal decay onto the outside world. You will often notice a chilling deadness in their eyes during this final stage, a hollow stare that reveals the absolute void inside. The vibrant, chaotic energy that fueled their younger years of manipulation has completely drained away, leaving a dry, empty shell. They are technically still alive, but psychologically, the person they pretended to be has already died 1,000 miserable, quiet deaths. In the quiet hours of the night, when there is no one left to perform for, the silence becomes their most terrifying and brutal enemy. The silence offers no validation, no arguments to win, and no innocent victims to thoroughly break down and control for their amusement. It forces them to sit alone with their own unbearable toxicity, creating a claustrophobic psychological nightmare they cannot wake from. This silent collapse frequently leads to severe paranoia, where they believe the world is actively conspiring to ruin their final days. Because they spent their life plotting against others, they naturally assume everyone else operates with the exact same dark malice. They become suspicious of their caregivers, paranoid about their finances, and entirely terrified that they are being secretly exploited. The bitter irony is that the total control they fought so desperately to maintain throughout their life is now entirely out of reach. Their bodies are failing, their minds are slipping, and the people they once dominated now hold complete authority over their care. This agonizing role reversal destroys their illusion of superiority, plunging them deeper into a state of profound and helpless despair. Sometimes, you might see brief flashes of vulnerability, moments where they almost seem to realize the massive gravity of their errors. But these fleeting moments are quickly aggressively repressed, replaced instantly by the familiar, comfortable armor of arrogant denial. To truly admit fault now would mean acknowledging that their entire existence was a total, unforgivable waste of a precious human life. They would much rather die in total denial than face the agonizing truth of their absolute emptiness and lifelong cruel behavior. So they double down on the delusions, clinging fiercely to the fading memories of their past glories and absolute dominance over you. They retreat entirely into their own mind, living in a distorted echo chamber where they are still the supreme, undisputed ruler of everything. This is the tragic, irreversible reality of the narcissist's final chapter, a slow fade into irrelevance, bitterness, and total decay. The collapse is completely silent because no one is left to care, no one is left to watch, and no one is left to mourn their ultimate end. As we prepare to understand the full scope of this endless cycle, we must look at how this fate remains an inescapable, eternal loop. The most terrifying aspect of this psychological collapse is that it serves as an eternal warning for those who choose to live this way. When a person actively rejects empathy, love, and authentic connection, they are writing a contract that guarantees their future misery. They trade genuine human warmth for a temporary illusion of power, entirely unaware of the devastating final price that must be paid. As you observe their miserable, lonely end, you can finally release any lingering anger or deep resentment you might still hold inside. You do not need to seek revenge or wait for an apology that will absolutely never come from their proud, broken, and toxic little mind. Their current reality is a punishment far worse than anything you could ever consciously inflict upon them in your wildest, darkest dreams. You can walk away from this dynamic knowing that you have secured your own freedom, while they remain locked in their personal hell. You have the beautiful capacity to heal, to build new, meaningful relationships, and to find absolute peace in your everyday existence. They are entirely incapable of experiencing any of these beautiful things, forever trapped in a cold, barren emotional wasteland of their own. This understanding completely removes their power over you, shattering the illusion that they were ever a formidable, unstoppable force. They were never a god, never a master, and never someone truly worthy of the immense fear and respect they demanded from your soul. They were simply a deeply broken, profoundly empty individual desperately trying to outrun the inevitable consequences of their own actions. The deadly years are not just a phase of aging. They are the ultimate, undeniable proof that manipulation is a totally failing strategy. You cannot cheat the fundamental laws of human connection without eventually having to balance the ledger when the game finally ends. The energy they stole from you has naturally returned to the universe, leaving them completely bankrupt in every conceivable spiritual way. If you ever find yourself feeling a momentary pang of guilt for abandoning them in their final days, remember the absolute truth of it. You did not abandon a loving family member or a devoted partner. You safely escaped a highly dangerous, toxic, and emotional predator. Leaving them to face their own consequences is not an act of cruelty. It is the ultimate, necessary act of your own spiritual self-preservation. As we examine the grand design of this toxic life cycle, it becomes completely clear that the end is always embedded in the very beginning. The moment they chose to wear a mask and exploit another human being, they locked in the coordinates for this miserable final destination. The journey may take decades, filled with countless victims and dramatic turning points, but the final, terrifying outcome is always the same. There is a deep, unsettling symmetry to the way a manipulator's life unfolds and eventually collapses completely in upon itself at the end. The same desperate hunger for validation that drove them to seek you out is exactly what leaves them starving when you finally walk away. The grand illusion requires constant maintenance, and when the caretaker leaves, the magnificent house of mirrors simply shatters into dust. To deeply comprehend the full tragedy of the aging narcissist is to understand the absolute necessity of living an honest, authentic life. We must look at their silent collapse not just as a fascinating case study, but as a profound testament to the ultimate power of reality. As the endless cycle of their deception finally runs out of momentum, we are left staring at the raw, inescapable truth of their grim existence. The illusion has fully expired, leaving them to blindly navigate a dark void they created, forever haunted by the ultimate, crushing consequence. They are trapped inside a collapsing fortress of their own tragic design, staring into the harsh reality that the cycle is now completely finished. We must understand exactly why they fail, because deep inside their painfully broken and decaying minds, it is an absolute, undeniable fact that,